So, I didn't have like a super ton prepared for this, but I thought it would be a good sort of tandem from our last conversation we had together of what are these terms, what are you even talking about, to what generally do groups do in war and sort of how that contributes to the overall objective, and also get people brainstorming on how do I fit, how and where do I want to fit into that picture. So we'll talk about really high level what is our objective and how do we get there, and also sort of how traditionally our armies built to accomplish that, and then sort of my perspective on that, and how I'm rostering and sort of how I'm thinking about these objectives and rostering in that way, and then what these groups do during the war to actually accomplish those objectives. So hopefully I can get through those kind of higher level. That's what I'm saying, like macro view. That's what I'm talking about. Is how is the army actually accomplishing the things we want to accomplish in the war with the people we have and the groups that we have, that sort of thing. So there'll be a little bit of terminology, a little bit of like strategy, and then in terms of like individual group play, we won't go into that tonight. I'll leave that for some more like, and then role play as well. Not like role play, but like role play, like ROLE play.
Hulu.
They're both the same, spelled
Yeah, I
in
guess so.
all context.
Yeah, different
So
context. Um, uh, but yeah, so that will have like some separate like for VGIGs and that sort of stuff. Each role. Um, but yeah, so right off the rip, some good things to know, a little bit terminology and sort of how the groups are generally structured. And this isn't 100% like has to be this way. And this has changed so much over the life of New World. Like it used to be like at the very beginning, everybody like ran as one big ball. Like they call it like the ball groups. And you'll hear me use that term sometimes too. And that's where that's coming from. It's just an older term is like we just run as a ball and just kill everything in our path kind of thing. But this is kind of the more recent quote unquote meta that has been established for the last year or so. Yeah, about a year, I'd say. So groups one and two are traditionally your point teams. And what that means is these are like your players that are always playing for point. It's usually made up of more tanky people. So I have a roster from Achromatia V1 back when we were playing before Fresh Start, right? And this is kind of what this build would look like. So you see in groups one and two, you have three bruisers, and really what that's after is you have three people that are these groups are meant to be good at controlling the point, right? So bruisers are generally good at that because they have a lot of abilities that can group people up and large area CCs, right? So that's why Warhammer Great Axe has traditionally been that build. But when you're kind of theory crafting yourself, I encourage you to do that and kind of have your use case for, hey, I think this would be a good point control build, for example, right? Because that's what this group is after. These two groups together, the point team. This is also where we embed generally our one tank. So there's usually one tank in the army. There's some really good benefits to having whatever that, it's not the leadership tree. Is that the tree? Whatever that tree is that gives a bunch of like buffs to friendlies in an area. Um,
defensive formation.
def-
That's the right side tree you're talking about,
yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. That tree is definitely valuable. Traditionally, you only run one of those in the whole army, and that person is very tanky. Their job is just to be using those buffing abilities and um, that ultimate to in the area where we're fighting. Essentially, just give people extra survivability, that sort of thing. So these are like your tanky point control groups. That's what there is to know here. And recently, the AOE healers embedded in here too. Just there's an extra spot here, but I mean they've kind of been throughout the army before, Group 10, whatever. They're not necessarily have to be there, but and then you have, of course, every group. You'll see this every group, of course, if this was not already a known thing, has one healer, always, forever and always. Healers are bis, so you're gonna have one in every group, and I'm not biased at all. Um, groups 3, 4, 5, and 6 are what in more recent times we called our quad groups, and that's referencing the four quarters on the point, right? Each quad. So I personally like to do it like this because my brain likes to think bottom up, small to large, odds on left, evens on right. That's how my brain likes to remember it. It doesn't, you'll see it different in different armies. But point is that these people are generally meant to play in their quad and help get point tick. And the most recent meta, everybody's playing on point. Like there are all these people and all these people, 30 people playing on, well, not the healers, right? So whatever, -6, right? 24 people playing on the point. Um, that's kind of the more recent. And the idea here is these, obviously, especially on attack, of course, there's a little bit of different like kind of strategy to this in terms of how these people should play on defense versus attack. Because on attack, you have the obligation of ticking the point up, right? So you have to have more numbers on there, or you'll just lose, right? And on defense, you can kind of take advantage of the fact that they are going to have to put numbers on there, so you can kind of just match their numbers, and you don't have to have more numbers than them, right? You just have to have the same numbers as them, and so it gives you a chance to kind of play a little more loose, and look for, they're going to be around point. They have to have more people around point than you, and so you can take advantage of that in the way that you crash, for example. You can kind of wait for them to crash and re-crash them, kind of those sort of advantages. The idea of these groups is that they are playing the point, keeping it sort of the tick under control, but they are playing their lives and building their deados traditionally, right? Because these are usually all bruisers as well, because again, we're going for more point control. So you see, this is my old roster. You can see I have Great Axe, Great Axe Warhammer ×2 in every group in these quad groups and point groups, right? And these people are just playing their lives, stepping point as much as they can, building their deados, so that at some point when you're, especially when you're on defense, or when you're on attack, you can sort of strategize together your burst damage all at one time. So if you are in one of these groups, you should kind of gravitate towards your quads while you're playing your life, whichever place is safer. And you can go like all the way down to, sometimes you'll hear like calls that are like, hey, let's play from the midline up kind of thing, right? So like maybe like this is still people playing in their quads right here, the way I have these positioned. It's just 5 and 6 are playing in the bottom of their quad, and 3 and 4 are just playing in their quad, right? They could be here too. I mean, but essentially like sometimes this is overloaded, and so there might be a call to play in certain places in your quad. But the idea is that you're playing in that quad until we have a crash call. We might call like a crash on bottom right, and then ideally what would happen, so let's assume we have a bunch of enemies like over here in bottom right, okay, and we're going to crash them, and I say crash on bot right in 3 and 2 and 1. What should happen is that countdown's happening is group 4 should actually try to wrap this as best they can. And that means like especially the IGVG, the most important one is the IGVG, should try to get behind this clump and get their ability down here like this, because we're trying to trap. The reason we're calling a crash here at all is we're trying to get some kills so that we have the number advantage. Because again, the point only, it's a numbers game, right? Whoever has more people on the point controls the tick. If you're on attack, obviously, you have to be more aggressive with this because you are the one obligated to have more numbers, right? On defense, you can play a little more reactive. But regardless, this concept of we're going to crash something so that we can get a couple kills and get a number advantage is the same on either side. Well, I mean, that's your objective of the crash, right? So like group 4 should try, like if we're crashing on bot right, group 4 should try to wrap this and kind of play from their back, and then everyone should crash from their side, basically. That's like the ideal, what's happening is these people are building up their stuff. They're grouping all this up with their grab wells. Maybe some of these guys are shockwaving so they can't get out. Some of them are holding shockwaves so that we can get out when we're done if we need to. And then, we crash on this. Hopefully we get a couple kills. And then if I'm good enough, which is something I need to work on, I can read the room at that point and say, hey, there's a couple left, stay for longer and kill. Or, hey, go, what's the word we say? Like, I almost said disband. Declump. Yeah, right. Spread out. Something like that, right? And then the objective at that point would be, okay, you go in, use your abilities, you kill as much as you can, and then you declump back towards whence you came. And that helps us so that we don't body block each other in here too, right? So that's kind of how the quad group kind of idea is meant to help us so that we have one, we can control tick with our presence on and around the point while not clumping ourselves too much and making prime targets out of ourselves. And we can better set up these types of attacks so that we get the most efficient angles on these attacks, so these people can't get out of this when we, if we do this right, these people can't go anywhere, right? So they'll hopefully die to that, and then we'll either stay and kill anybody who doesn't die in the initial crash, or we'll go back to where we were. And because of our angles that we approached in, we won't be stepping on each other's toes. We won't body block each other. We can get our way out of this clump, and we just resume. If you're on attack, on defense, you just resume maintaining the tick. And if you're on attack, hopefully you have now the numbers advantage, and they're going to have to make a move. Otherwise, you're going to start ticking that point up. That was a lot. Any questions or thoughts? Anyone want to add anything about point team and quad groups and generally playing on around the point? That's what these groups are kind of about. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so those are quad groups. Honestly, super fun. I think it's super fun. And it's very different. Like, what's so cool, why this is the premier content in all of video gaming, in my opinion, what's so cool is getting these things right and like learning this role or a different role even, right? Like I'm trying new roles. I know a bunch of people here that are legacy players are trying new roles. Is the art of doing this well is so different than the art of doing this stuff well, right? So like that's what's really I think is just really exciting. And yeah, if you think that sounds interesting to you, to like be in the fray, to like have you're this kind of bigger, tankier, explodey boy, bruiser, this is the place for you. Or IGV, and IGVG too. Honestly, I've heard it said by a lot of people, and I tend to agree with this. Your wars and the point are really won and lost by IGVGs. Between the debuffs, the showers, the control of the area control that they give you, and the screams, right? Like screams as the crash is happening, screams as they're trying to retreat, like showers around the backside of the clump, like that. Those are everything. The timing of those is everything to controlling and winning a point. So if any of those things interest you, we definitely need more of that. I think a bunch of people actually now kind of want to do IGVG, but bruisers in particular, I think it's super exciting. So yeah, if you think it sounds interesting, give it a shot. It's a bit of a build, but it seems like it's always a really expensive build. But
it's pretty okay now.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, if you go the earlier version route with the $50, it's pretty okay.
Nice. Okay, how do I get rid of all this? So in terms of the other groups in more recent history, the kill squads are these, and you've seen from what we've done so far, just based on the roles that we have. We've had a lot of range, which generally the range is here. Something I didn't mention, but usually the fifth slot. So if I go back to my roster from last time, the fifth slot of these is usually a flex slot. So you'll see here I just say group 11, group 11, group 11. And that has changed so much. Like even within the larger meta being 24 people stepping point, this has changed many times in that window from BBs to spears. Um, More towards the end, it was like fire staffs. Towards the end of Legacy before Fresh Start. But yeah, so this is a really flexible role. The way I like to play this role, inside this extra is like as an additional group, as a group 11. So you can just plus them into whatever, right? You can plus them into, hey, the weak side's struggling. Let's plus them there and shore up that line or something, right? So that's another role that I've been using a lot of you fire staffs because we have a lot of fire staffs. I've been using you in that spot. But yeah, outside of that spot, this is where all your range damage lies, is in your kill squads. And again, in the recent history meta, you would have, which I don't know, I've played with like three tankies and one ranged in group 7. Just for like normalcy's sake, let's say two tanky like disruptors, which are people generally. Sword and shield lends itself well in this role. Spear lends itself really well because it's control for your range damage. Your range damage is your DPS to follow up on your control kind of thing. And even IGVG. So you can see here we did in Acro V1 we had this is kind of when IGVG in Kill Squad was coming back around there towards the end of Legacy. So we had some IGVG again just for that control. Idea being that you have a couple people controlling the Kill Squad fight and a couple people focusing damage together, which would be either fire staffs or bows. Not really muskets. They're just muskets just not that great in war in general. It's bows just better. So generally they're bows. But yeah, so these groups are what you hear me refer to as kill squads, and in recent history, you generally would set these up like you have a strong side and a weak side. You hear me use those terms a lot. Actually, not on B like this, but whatever. Pretend this isn't B, I guess, or it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Usually, you have like a strong side and a weak side, and what that means is just literally you have 3 groups on this side and 1 on that side, right? So this is clearly going to be stronger. That's the concept. But this is so flexible. This is kind of the defined meta, like or it has been for a while. But there's so much you can do with this because if you're struggling, like something that people do classically is if they're like, let's say they're on the last point and they have their strong side trying to come over here, right? They got their weak side here and they're on this side, and they're just not winning like this. Sometimes they'll pull this over and they'll go like this, right? So they have like a 2-2, try and catch them off guard because they're probably only going to be addressing this one group with the one group. So there's like so much flexibility and freedom. You'll hear me, when I'm like consciously calling, you'll hear me try to adjust these numbers, or even like when we're splitting, right? I'll try and like really mess with these numbers to see if we can catch them off guard on one side. And these groups, I probably should have started with this, but these groups are playing not for point; they're playing for space outside of the point. And what that means again is also really flexible because like maybe the objective is 7 and 8 traditionally their objective is to just kind of own what we call like the inner lane, which is basically the lane close to the point but off the point. Because there's a lot of traffic that goes through here, right? Like there's bruisers trying to escape those crashes I was just talking about. There's probably another group of 5 kill squad trying to just this is the shortest path back to your healers, right? So we try to clog this lane, this inner lane, with these groups historically, traditionally. I know right now in particular, like even Impulsive was messaging about this, where some people are just like screw holding a line, just full send, right? Like just don't even try to contest their kill squad, just go full send and just who can kill faster, right? Because they're going to be doing potentially the same thing with their kill squads. But there's just so much flexibility in how you play with these groups. And the idea is that these groups are going to help us control space outside the point because we have a designated group always forever of 11 people who are going to need space offside the point. And that's our healers, right? They're probably not, so this is another thing too. In more recent history meta, people are asking healers to step for the extra numbers, right? Because there's so many numbers on the point in general. But for the most part, healers are not probably playing on point. And so we're trying to create a safe space for them to play. Because if they're constantly being disrupted, then obviously our bruisers, those big crashes we were talking about, those really critical moments for them to get those casts off, they're just not going to be able to, right? And so that's make or break in those moments where you're getting bursted or you're running into a big fight. If your healer's not ready and sharp, that could be the difference, right? So these groups are really important for making sure that this is not just a free for all, wherever your healers are, right? But like I said, there's so much like variability in what we can choose to do with these because you could also just say, sorry healers, play your life. We're going to just gamble and try and take their healers before they take ours. That's an option that I've heard like run, right? So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, these groups are, they're all about fights, like usually 5v5 fights or trying to plus into each other's fights, but they're fighting off point. There's a lot more mobility involved. Obviously, you're a ranged DPS. You don't really have a choice. You're out here in one of these fights. But if you're looking for that sort of gameplay, this is more your jam. And really, these like the main objective, other than controlling space out here, is like ideally we control space, and once we control space, we we convert that into pressure in some way or shape or form. So you'll hear me say in my raid plans a lot, like group 7 and group 8, if you win your space, look inwards. And what I mean by that is quite literally move your body closer to the point, right? And start harassing everything and anything right on that rim of the point. And if you have the opportunity, even step on the point. Like, again, we're just trying to, especially if you're on attack, right? You're, again, more obligated to be the person taking up the point. And so that additional pressure, that's the whole world right there. That's the difference between taking the point up and them just matching your numbers. And it's those types of sort of micro movements of your groups that are gonna that can make them, they think, hey, they only have 4 quad groups here on this point, so we can match it with our 4, and we can still play wide, and we can still just, fight for this space out here, no biggie. But as soon as you start stepping an extra 4 people, they're like, wait, how are we losing this tick? We think we're matching, right? And they're gonna have to make a move to try and match that tick. That, of course, is being like on attack, right? But so, yeah, I guess that's a really important. Depending on, this is so flexible that honestly, you just have to be ready to be flexible depending on what we need in the war. And there's going to be a lot of calls that change your job mid-war. But I think a good rule of thumb is if you start to if you start to get an advantage, don't just sit in on that as like, okay, I wait for them to come back to me, right? Convert that advantage into pressure in some shape or form. And then usually you'll hear me say at the beginning of raid plans, like for groups 9 and 10, what I'm looking for is high priority kills. So healers, other DPS, right? If you guys start getting an advantage, then the way you convert that pressure, I've seen like an old Naomi uh, version of this where she says everything points in, right? Like everything, this guy pressures inwards this one, this pressures inward this one. But I think there's a lot of like option in that. You can either plus into the 9 fight to help them win so that they can plus into the back line, or you can just kind of all collectively plus your way into their back line. Point is that these groups are trying to get kills and turn that advantage into some sort of pressure, right? And that can be the tipping point of ultimately what's happening on and around the point. Yeah, so those are kind of the kill squads. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything about those. Like I said, they're usually comprised of like 2 more control related roles. Typically Sword and Shield's involved in that because it's really good at control. And 2 DPS roles, and always, forever and always, a healer. And you heard me mention that this is the difference between winning the point. And you heard me mention that VGIGs are the difference between winning the point. And you heard me mention that good crashes are the difference between winning and losing the point, right? Point is that every one of these roles is important, and doing them well together and playing your role and winning at your objective and turning that into advantage for other people in your army. I mean, that's the whole art of this, right? Is doing that together and getting better at the things that we do, whatever our job is, so that we can help each other win this thing. And that's just super thrilling and super fun forever. I mean, no matter how many hundreds of wars you do, it's extremely fun. Yeah, so those are the kill squads. Any questions or anything you want to add, anybody, about kill squads and playing out of the point, off of the point?
A little deeper into comp of those groups, like
Uh-huh.
the quack people I was playing with last night, they used the term, I think, sender and like base.
Mm-hmm.
So that you've got like the one guy who is the initiator of the violence, and then the guy who is like the point at which the whole group plays around. I don't know what those builds like look like.
Those are disruptor builds. They're
okay.
Sword and Shield, the CC blocks.
Yeah,
So the sender and holder are those 2. Sender can also.
Mhm.
Generally, the sender will be like tankier and just like more CC. Holder even runs like great sword, more like focus damage with the range sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also focuses on peel, like more so like coming back to peel for like bows or fire staff or healers.
Pipeline defender, basically. I'll bet in there a bit because I used to play this role a lot. In a sense, the way Kill Squad groups work is you're gonna have your two main melees. One's gonna be a sender, one's gonna be a holder. The difference between the two is your sender. The sender's main job in a group is to CC lock the healer enough to be able to get a kill. That's the sender's job. Now, usually you see a sender running a Scorpion Sting with a hatchet or an SMS or something that offers CC lock, so that you pretty much make their healer's life a living hell. The holder's job is pretty much playing as a four-man, so you're going to be playing with your healer, your two DPS, and your holder. Your holder's main job is to keep their front line from getting into your map. It's pretty much the big sense of it. Now, usually the way you see things work out is what the sender will do is kind of make the healer burn a couple abilities. Once the healer burns, the sender is going to call out those abilities that got burnt, and he's going to start a CC combo. When he starts a CC combo, he's going to ask for his DPS, or her DPS, whatever it may be, to focus the healer. In a sense, what that means is your sender is now full comboing their healer. They're going to be locked for about 10 to 12 seconds. In those 10 to 12 seconds, you have the opportunity to either kill the healer or kill one of their light DPS. As a kill squad in general, this goes for everybody in kill squad. Rule number 1 will always be never, never, ever, and I mean ever, focus the healer. The melee players will be the tankiest. They will be the hardest to kill. They are there to be a distraction. Why? Because if they're good at their job, what they're going to do is they're going to send it fully at you. They're going to keep you there while their DPS lights you up, and you're going to die for it. Right? If you just auto lock onto their sender or holder, whoever it may be, that's their melee player that's sending it onto you, ignore them. Completely ignore them. And I'm sorry for healers, but usually healers know how to deal with these players. They're gonna run away or whatever it may be. If they need a peel, the healer usually is vocal about it. They will let you know, hey, I need a peel for 2 seconds. In that sense, your holder will offer that peel. Your holder pretty much is to keep your healer alive. That's pretty much their main goal, is to keep the group alive, but the main priority is keeping your healer alive. If the healer gets jumped on, the holder sits back, helps the healer get out, and goes back. Right? And that's kind of a big thing. I'm going to touch on it a lot more tomorrow in detail and explain everything to you guys. But that's kind of the gist of it, and I will tell you off the rip, I'm going to separate it more tomorrow as far as Group 8, 9, and 10 goes. But Group 10, I don't care what you're doing, your fight should always, and I mean always, be in Narnia. Group 10's job is to create a 5-on-5 the entire war. Your war in general is a 5-on-5 match. If you win that 5-on-5, one, not two, not three, one of your DPS will then look inwards to plus. Like Nox explained, what plussing kind of is, in a sense, in a general aspect, is when your group is winning a fight, one of your DPS is going to turn and they're going to look inwards. Your group 9 is going to be next to you. They're going to help group 9 get a pick. If they get a pick, group 9 turns in to look at group 8. If group 8 gets a pick, group 8 turns in to look at point. So it's kind of a ricochet effect, right? You get a pick, you turn. Another pick, you turn. Kind of creates this constant cycle. I'll say one thing about Kill Squad is that if you kill the enemy, like the opposing group's healer, go for their melees immediately, or free targets. Because they're always overextended. And they will die. But only if the healer's done.
Yeah, thank you guys. But yeah, those types of conversations are, Kata's going to be running a bunch of these specific to these roles. So like, if you want to learn more about how to be proficient in not just, I'm going over just kind of the high level objectives of these groups, but how to actually accomplish that, like literally, like what should I do? How should I combo this? How should I, what should be my like priority 1, 2, and 3 in my head when I'm the sender, for example, right? That's the kind of stuff that we'll spend time in those specific role type conversations, and Kata will lead us through those. Yeah, but thanks, guys. Thanks for your contribution there. Last thing I want to, well, not last thing, but I also want to talk about, I've been talking about these with regard to the point this whole time, right? And these roles don't necessarily change when you hit the fort, but how you approach the space is going to be different, because instead of just like a circle with a bunch of emptiness around it, you have like a circle with so many features around it, right? So the first thing that you'll notice, and a term that you've heard said by me every time, this is generally something I personally think is worth doing, and you'll see a lot of companies do this, is you'll hear us say that we're going to waterfall. And if you haven't caught on already, that means that, let's say that we just took this point last, right? We're going to all stay here, and usually this will include kill squads to some extent. And at some point I'll say, okay, you can go to your gates, kill squads, right? Like the people that are in the back. And the point of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to just get rid of all the emplacements. Horns are good. Horns are strong. And we don't want to fight them while they have horn buff ever, basically. So the idea is that we destroy all the horns in this space, right? We leave some people. We waterfall our way over, right? We leave some people behind. Usually these are 2 quad groups. So if you look at, historically, these are 2 bruiser groups, right? Great Axe Warhammer and VGIG with a healer. So we leave, and again, I do this for my own brain's sake. I always leave odd numbers there first, because odds are on the left. That's how I always remember it. And then, everybody's going to waterfall here. We're going to clear all these horns around here, and then we're going to waterfall one more time, right? We'll have like 4 and 6, and I typically do this. This is kind of my thing. I've just always kind of do this, but it doesn't have to be this way. Again, 7, 8, 9, 10 are always, like, you got to be flexible, right? But I tend to do this where I just let them waterfall over with us, and that just kind of helps get through all this stuff faster, I think. And then so basically you end up with sort of, let's just assume that we do this. You end up with this thing where you have your bruisers spread out, right? You have 2 groups here, 2 groups there, 2 groups there. And then these are, plus damage in various places, or you could even, I didn't mention group 11, but maybe group 11's here, and group 9's here, and group 10's here. Is kind of a more balanced approach to it. I generally try to overload one thing, so we at least get somewhere that we get in pretty well. Once we get all this stuff down and all the gates down, then we'll be looking to enter the fort. And we always time this together. Like, it's never like, well, in the early bits of it, if you can, like, if you are, I'm trying to think the best way to say this. If you're like a ranged person and you happen to get in, there are like targets that you could be working on taking out their shops, for example, or their repair parts, which are on my numbers right here. But generally, we're going to time this, right? We're all going to wait at our gate. I'm going to count it down. We're all going to push at once. Idea being that they can't just like hard focus on one spot because everybody's pouring in slowly, and then kill everyone and then hard focus on the next spot, right? They have to kind of deal with everything at once. And you have a more even matchup because they're probably spread out in a very smearer way to this, right? Expecting that you're going to have 2 groups here and so on and so forth. When we do call that push, the objective is that when we're on attack, okay, so we'll talk about defense in a second, but when we're on attack, the objective is to not get stuck here. So these groups should, as quickly as they can, make their way here. This is where cleanse pots come in handy. So you're going to cleanse your way through, make your way in here. Healers, I think, look for a place that you can make it in here. Obviously, you're going to be going through maybe some stuff right here. Maybe you hop on this little corner here and you try to go up top and play up top. Just, you're trying to live while your groups make their way into the point. And then we're playing very similarly inside for the bruiser groups as we did outside. I'd go as far as saying pretty much the same. Yeah, pretty much the same. The kill squads is going to vary a lot. Like, it's going to change a lot. Just period. As you've heard me say out loud a million times, I'm a big dirt believer. So what that means is I'm going to try and create extra pressure in their dirt so that we have some safe places to play. Hi, whoever that is. and then we'll have usually what I say is like 9 and 10 will fight for heaven. So up here above, again, just trying to create more safe places for more. We're just trying to create some pockets of control so that we can play like we did outside. We can call those crashes, have our healers have a spot to heal from, and have certain space that is ours that we can play in safely. We're trying to accomplish all that in here, but there's obviously a lot more like features that we're playing around. So I guess at a very very high level, it's really the same objective, which is we're gonna control not the whole thing, but a certain space so that we can play from a strong side or a strong space, and do the same stuff we were doing outside, getting group 7 to get a tiny advantage and secretly stepping so they're like, what the fuck, we thought we were matching, now all of a sudden we're losing tick, right? All that kind of stuff that we were just talking about doing outside, that same mentality of I'm winning, I'm going to take control of this, I'm winning, I'm going to turn this advantage into an advantage for another group of players, right? Or I'm going to turn this into I get a kill here, I'm going to look to get extra pressure towards their backstage / hell kind of thing, right? That whole it's the same game essentially. It's just a lot different. It's a lot different in there because of the obstacles. And one thing about the fort, you'll hear, kind of like that last point. The fort, there's if we start to lose ground here, we'll reset all the way, like all the way back out. Just completely evacuate the thing, because it is so challenging with all these extra features. It's not like you can like when you're out here on a point, right? You can spawn in and you basically have access to wherever you want on the point fairly easily. In here, you have to go through these choke points, right? So it's a completely different ball game in terms of getting set up inside. Usually, if you don't get it right away, which you usually don't. I mean, in a competitive war, you're going to be doing this. You're going to be doing this a lot, and you're going to potentially be changing up your strategy a lot. Maybe you're switching and you're overloading on this side to see if you can get a couple kills. And of course, with the longer respawns as the war goes on, you can get an advantage in numbers, and you can start taking that advantage and turning it into point tick. This is super fun. I mean, this is the most exciting part of the war, right? But it's very hard also. And it changes from, little subtle things that with different patches, and especially the whole respawn window bug right now where defense is just at such a disadvantage because they can't ever respawn kind of thing. I mean, it just changes who it's easier for, but regardless, for it is always, I'm going to say always challenging just because you are working with choke points, right? And so you have to kind of, you have to play around those like features inside here.
Invites go out in 1 minute, by the way.
Oh shit, already?
Spawning, I'm not sure if it's still true. Well, it used to be related to everyone spawning at the same spot. Or dying at the same time, so you can try
spreading them.
The individual different points.
Gotcha.
So like if you are the top left, spawn at the top left.
Okay,
In general.
that's fair. Yeah, and I kind of flipped between talking about defense and offense there a little bit, but yeah, so that was kind of like offense, and then on defense, obviously. So on defense, again, you're not the one obligated to spin the point, right? So you can be a little more flexible with where and when you apply pressure. So we try to obstruct slightly, like not like completely invest our lives into it, but we can try to delay them at these gates a little bit more, and then meet them. We still have to meet their tick, right? But we don't have to. We're not the ones that have to get more numbers on the point, right? So we can take advantage of that, and maybe we play a little looser. Maybe we have our usually we'll designate one of these groups as a flex group. So like group 6 is a flex group. Maybe we let them have a little bit extra pressure on this side because we know that they're going to overload one side. That sort of idea. Let me just check if I need to pull anybody real quick. Oh, Jamie.
I missed invite from logging in.
I did not get invite.
Yeah, it hasn't gone out yet. We're doing
Yeah, I did say that. Do we have any people that don't have TeamSpeak now? Or I think actually Zhao was like the only person that didn't have it. I don't know that for sure, but
I currently don't, but I can
okay.
get it.
Okay.
got 15 minutes, boy.
I don't know what canary.
It's just Discord V2. It's like
Just do TeamSpeak.
we'll just do TeamSpeak. Yep. That's fine.
TeamSpeak 3.
But yeah, just to wrap this up. So essentially, like I said, we'll be doing a lot more of this on like a more role specific, job specific place. Kata will be leading us through that. But hopefully this was helpful, at least from a, hey, I'm in one of these groups. I'm in a point team. You tell me I'm in a point team. What does that mean? What am I after? Right? What am I trying to do? And what should I have in my head, sort of at a high level, is my objective. And then yeah, we'll go from there.